Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Economies and Neighbourhoods Scrutiny panel. It's great to see so many people here today. So we'll start off just by everyone doing the introductions, if that's okay. So I'm Harpreet, I'm the chair of the Economies and Neighbourhoods Scrutiny panel.
Sheila Dykes, the governance officer.
Andrew Bird, co-optee.
Councillor Yusra Hussain for Batley West.
Richard Murgatroyd, Councillor Gouker Ward.
Councillor John Taylor, Burton Ward.
Ely Ogden, co-optee.
Martin Bolt, Councillor Murfield Ward.
Rob Dolby, Green Space Operations Manager, Kirklees.
Martin Wood, Operations Manager for Public Protection.
Afternoon, Wendy Blakely, Head of Public Protection.
Thank you, everybody. I just want to note some apologies. We've got apologies from Chris Friend, a co-optee, and Councillor Richard Eastwood today. Okay, so if we can start with the minutes of the previous meeting. Any questions, comments on those minutes? No? Someone happy? Oh, sorry, go Martin.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I had to leave before the end of the last meeting. Can't see it in here. Was anything discussed or arranged about having the study or site visit looking at cycling infrastructure in Kirklees, please?
Yeah, we just mentioned that with speaking with officers about that. Sheila is just waiting to get a comprehensive set of maps which we can share with colleagues, and then we're just looking at some potential dates with the officers. So yeah. Oh, okay, that's excellent. So Sheila might want to speak to Martin as well. Thanks, Martin. Any other questions or comments, or is someone happy to approve the minutes? Yes, Richard, Andrew, yeah? Okay, thank you. Okay, so the meeting is open to the public, and we've got some members of the public here today, which is excellent. We do have a deputation today, and I want to welcome Heather, Peacock and Richard. So if you want to state your name and the nature of your deputation, you've got 5 minutes to speak. If you just want to use your microphone.
I'm Heather Peacock, Kirklees Climate Emergency Group / Save Green Net Trees. Do you want me to do what I'm doing now? Trees are an important part of the climate emergency. Sorry, you just put the microphone. Yeah, oh, yes. All right. You don't have to speak. I don't have to, oh, is it right? Trees are an important part of tackling climate change, as we all know. They are so important they need protecting. Today we welcome a tree policy put before the committee today. We asked for a tree policy in September and you delivered. It's great that tree policy is taking shape and at last the council is taking our trees seriously. According to the policy, healthy trees will be protected. The council will enhance the trees and woodlands. Increasing tree cover and effective management is at the heart of the tree policy. However, our group is concerned about the lack of dates and targets for further tree planting outlined in the policy. We think the council could go further to really tackle the climate emergency. When we came in September, we brought 5 asks to the council. I'd just like to go over those. The first was a tree policy, which we hopefully have from the council. And we'd ask that the council, until it's all signed, sealed, delivered, that there's no more cutting unless in an emergency. Point 2, a commitment to urban replanting. Audit all council sites where can more trees be planted? Schools need encouragement from the council to plant trees. Businesses and landowners need encouragement to plant trees. A green plaque for planting a tree could be an incentive. 3, protecting existing trees and promoting more trees through the planning system, which the planning system's mentioned, but unfortunately trees will be cut down through the planning system, which I think you really need looking at. The local plan should be updated to reflect the importance of protecting existing trees and increasing tree cover in helping combat the climate emergency. The wholesale felling of trees on developmental sites should not be allowed, and planting new trees should be a condition of planning permission under 106 agreements. I don't think the planning on the policy, which is a real shame because many hundreds of trees are lost this way. We see scope for a tree preservation order, an area tree preservation order, to secure tree cover for flood management and climate mitigation.
Thank you. So I'm Richard Stove, representing the same bodies. So I'd like to emphasise the opportunity of area tree preservation orders, such that there is real scope within council control, if you like, that doesn't depend on central government to really make a difference. So I've been discussing with people the concept of a whole valley forest, so that the whole valley catchment could actually be declared as an area tree preservation order. It could be declared as a forest. It could be incorporated in flood management plans, and really developed based on simply an tree preservation order. I had very interesting discussions with Yorkshire Water about.
You've got 1 minute.
Okay, about whole valley forest based on woodland at the head of the valley, and that's the Yorkshire Water can't even access their own woodland there because of the conditions of the shooting interests. The 30% increase that's proposed in the policy doesn't really compare to the 100% that we're proposing. And it's only declared as an aim, even at 30%. So there's clearly a lot more scope in all that. And as far as street trees are concerned, within council control, it really should be a moratorium until the whole policy matter has been resolved. Finally, if it goes out to contract, not to make the same mistake that's been made in Sheffield, but that the whole tendering process needs to be in the open with public consultation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your deputation. I'm going to ask the Cabinet Member or the appropriate officer if they want to respond. Martin, did you want to raise a point of order?
Well, yeah, sorry, Chair. Just before Rob launches in, could I suggest that rather than Rob responding and then shortly we're going to be discussing it as a substantive item, if it's okay with you, Rob, if we bring the substantive item forward, that would encompass the Cabinet Member's response, members' contributions, and deal with it, I think, in a probably more logical way.
No, I think that is a logical way forward. Yes, I agree. As long as the people from the deputation are happy with that, yeah, that's great.
Okay, the only thing I want to ask then is we've got our air quality action plan colleagues sat here. Would you mind if we brought forward the tree and woodland policy? Would that be of any issue for yourselves?
That'd be fine.
Would that be okay? Okay. What we'll do then is we'll we'll bring that forward just so we can take on can carry on from the deputation if that's okay. We might just have to play about with the presentation. Okay. And just we've also got a public question time item, so I do just want to check. We don't have any other members of the public here, but obviously if you do want to come back on the, you'd obviously have the opportunity to do that. Is that okay? Okay. So if you could just bear with us for a moment, we need to just switch the slides around. We've got a bit of a new system here, so we're just going to do that and then we'll get started. Oh, it's actually been quicker than I thought. Excellent. Excellent news. So, what we're going to do then, we're going to hear from Rob. He'll give his presentation and then we'll, if you can keep it short, Rob, and then we can obviously just take on board, if you can bring any comments in from the deputation as well, and then we'll bring Councillor Walker in as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. This will be quite a whistle-stop tour. There's quite a lot of information to go through, so apologies if it does seem slightly rushed. So we're covering off the council-owned tree policy, which includes risk management and that kind of thing, and also how that interlinks and interleaves with the White Rose Forest work. That's the intention. So we have around 600 hectares of tree cover in council ownership, and we obviously like trees. So we have produced a tree policy. The tree policy covers 3 principal documents. So it's the overarching policy statement, the tree works and how that will be managed, and then the risk management framework. So the main policy statements. We have a proactive tree and woodland enhancement programme. So we look to actively enhance our woodlands, which links to the White Rose Forest. The White Rose Forest commitment is a 30% increase on our present cover, and our present cover is about 15.3% of the district. So that equates to about 2.5 million trees, based on the planting densities. We're looking to protect our existing tree and woodland assets, and we're looking to bring our woodland assets back into active management, and then there'll be an integrated management plan for the proposed new woodlands as they start to mature. That management programme will be integrated between the two. And then the risk management is predominantly relating to how we manage our tree stock, which is predominantly, again, the urban and the peri-urban tree stock, so things that are more likely to present a risk to people and to the environment, and we would then look at how we deal with that. And then the final part of it is around conflict. So we receive far more, as shocking as this may seem, requests to remove trees than we do to people to save trees. And there's a large portion of this, I don't know if you all had a chance to actually read the policy, but there's a very large portion explaining why we won't take trees out in relation to poor phone signals or Skype reception not being very good or leaves falling on your lawn or the multitude of other reasons that people are concerned around trees. So the risk management framework, it aligns with the HSE, it looks at National Tree Safety Guidance Group, and we look at 3 principal parts of that. So there is areas of high probability or high risk, medium and low, and that relates to proximity to public footpaths, within public spaces and so on. The further you are away from that, the less likely it is to happen. And it also takes into account things like ash dieback, and the severity of the impact if a tree or a significant limb fails. So, as it says here, you can read as well as I can. It's around about zoning, it's about frequency of inspections, and it's about prioritisation of remedial works. So we have already taken on 2 more tree inspectors, so we now have 4 tree inspectors. We have upped the inspection regime, so we should be going to all the priority ones, all the zone 1 ones every 18 months to inspect them. And then that falls away as the zoning frequency drops off. And again, if there are priority remedial works, then they will also be prioritised. So we made sure of that. The guidance document that covers basically what we have to do, and how we will manage it, how we'll protect wildlife, and a little bit in there around woodland management as well. So some silvicultural advice around that. We talk quite a lot about street trees. There is a commitment that if we take street trees out for whatever reason, we will replace them, and we will do our best to replace them as close as we can. It may not be possible. That sounds a bit like a cop-out, but the reality is we live in a town and in a district that some areas it's very congested. There's an awful lot of infrastructure under the ground. To put trees back in isn't always possible. There's fibre, there's gas, there's electricity and so on. We will do our best, but we can't always promise we will manage that. But what we will do is we'll make sure that the consultation and engagement is as strong as we can possibly make it, so people know and understand the reasons why we are doing things. And just for clarity, the main reason that we would ever have to take street trees out is for public safety. So, and that generally sits around highway schemes. They're not road trees. That was a highway scheme. That was around pavement safety. So the reason the trees having to come out was there was significant pavement heave. So woodland management, I could wax lyrical about this for hours, but I won't. So we are looking at a number of management prescriptions for how we will manage our woodland. We could potentially look at the in-house delivery, 600 hectares. We would create our own forestry team. Creation of social enterprise, that is probably my preferred option, but not necessarily the option we'll go for. So we would look at seeing how we can manage our woodlands using people who wish to become involved. There is potentially a business opportunity inside that. It isn't commercially viable. Most of our woodlands are what's described as suboptimal, so they don't either have significant large standing timber which has good commercial value, or it's extremely difficult to extract. So we would consider things like heavy horse. I know it sounds quite archaic, but actually it's the least damaging and it's the easiest way to get in small-scale timber extraction. And we have been in discussion in the past with various commercial operators looking at how we could get a price per cube, so timber's measured by the cubic metre, to roadside. So if they can manage to extract to the roadside, they get a guaranteed price, which would support the social enterprise model. So outsourcing to commercial operator, there are a number of issues around that. It would need to be very tightly controlled, and a lot of our woods are suboptimal, but it's certainly an option. And then community asset transfer. People might want to take on woods. Woods carry a significant liability attached to them, so if people want that. And our woodland management scheme as well was taking account of things like climate change adaptation. We have a limited palette of trees in this country. The land bridge closed around 4,500 years ago. There are many more trees on the other side of the channel, which potentially could provide the same level of biological benefits, ecological benefits, but provide more robustness within our woodland structure. So that sort of things like that. And obviously ash dieback. If you haven't heard about ash dieback, 90% of the ash trees will be dead in the district within the next 10 years. Possibly more than that if emerald borer beetle comes in, which equates to 6.2% of our tree cover across the district. So it's not just a 30% increase that we have to do, it's actually a 36% increase because we have to take into account of ash dieback. So the flight path for the three documents, so it's scrutiny today. There'll be an internal review, which will be run in parallel with an external review. So that's going to the various stakeholders and partners, people like highways, like K&H and so on, and planning. And we're also going to go out to the Woodlands Trust for some level of verification, see that they're comfortable with this, so that we have a view on that. And then we'll take it to Cabinet. With a hope we'll get it to Cabinet certainly before the pre-election period, but ideally quite a long way before the pre-election period. So we are serious about this. White Rose Forest. We are signed up to the White Rose Forest. The White Rose Forest supports a number of things, and it sits solidly within the climate emergency work as well. So you've got Landscapes for Water and the Green Streets projects. Green Streets, which looks at urban and peri-urban tree planting. The Landscapes for Water, which looks a lot around natural flood management and those kind of works. And a significant part of the way that Kirklees are going to approach this is looking at sensible tree planting. So we're doing a landscape level assessment of the entire district. We will then look at where the linkages are, where the potential habitat corridors are, where the ground is suitable, so we don't want to adversely impact on already fragile landscapes. So if there's a decent acid grassland or there's twite habitat or any of those things, we would not look to tree plant on those. It's not a blanket approach to tree planting. It's a considered, knowledge-driven approach to tree planting. And it's working very strongly, and it will be with third-party landowners as well. The council does not have enough land to meet 30%. It certainly doesn't have enough to meet 100% increase. So if you looked at it pro rata, we would be doing about 10%. We'll probably do more than that. But we will be working with third-party landowners. A large part of the reason for the landscape level work is to see where we'll get our most bang for our buck, see where we should actually focus our attentions, certainly for things like natural flood management, certainly for things like habitat creation and linkages and corridors. But equally, we'll be very open if any of our large landowners wish to come to us, and that we can say, well, actually, there is this. So we can look at funding streams and technical support to them in relation to that. We're also working closely with the Yorkshire Wildlife Trust and the National Trust. We're doing work already with the National Trust up in the Upper Wesendon Valley, part of the natural flood management up there, and that's linked to the Yorkshire Water work. So, and the gentleman there mentioned the Home Valley. So the Landscapes for Water, Future Landscapes Partnership is looking at the Holme and Colne catchments, so the entire thing, looking at natural flood management within that, but looking at tree planting as an integral part of that. And then within that then falls landscape level change, falls recreation, falls climate change adaptation and mitigation, so things like sequestration of carbon as well as the adaptation for that. So this gives you an idea of the scale. So we've got 15.2%, Leeds has got 17, so they've got slightly more than us. We have got a very, very large number of trees to plant. The gentleman there mentioned dates. In order to meet our canopy cover target, we need to get most of these trees in the ground within the next 10 years. Otherwise, there just will not be the canopy creation to meet that. So we are looking to employ 2 officers, a woodland officer and a White Rose Forest support or liaison. His post title hasn't been, or her post title hasn't been decided yet, who will focus entirely on our woodlands. So the woodlands officer will look at the woodlands in the round, but the White Rose Forest person will be focused entirely on the delivery of the White Rose Forest. A lot of that will be around data management and about engagement with landowners, so and some contractual work as well. You can read that if you want. So there is a design ethos, like I've said, but it generally is working on planting trees where we can. We have got a portfolio of council land that we are looking at the moment, and there is a report going to my management team, so to Carl Battersby, to look at, do we actually consider ways that we use council land differently? So things like grazing licences, is that the most appropriate use of council land, or should we be looking at a different delivery mechanism in relation to that? And this just gives you a flavour of where we're doing this year and over the next couple of years, and that's the dots for that.
Thank you.
As quick as I can make it.
Perfect. Councillor Walker, did you want to say anything at this stage?
I'll just respond back to the initial points that were raised by the deputation, and thanks very much for those. And the things that you were raising, I think you're raising issues that are important to us, and are most of the things I think we will cover. Some of the other things, there's the potential for having a look at things. So thank you for recognising the fact that we have tried to move as quickly as possible with the tree policy. Replanting where we have to remove trees, because there will always be cases where, due to the state of the trees or particular road improvement works that are taking place, things will have to be removed. We are committed to always trying to replace those wherever possible. And if we cannot replace them on that particular site, looking at alternative sites where we can ensure that planting is taking place. I like the idea of plaques and things like that in terms of recognising when things are happening. I remember that kind of thing happening in the past to celebrate where schools are planting trees. And I do know that there are quite a number of schools and colleges who are looking at schemes like this, and they will get our support. I've personally committed myself to go out and plant some trees up at New College where I used to work, so that's great. Protecting and promoting and linking with planners, yeah, that's something that's very close to my heart. I think it's really important when any plans come forward. Certainly if trees are being cut down to facilitate development taking place, we should really be seriously looking at how we can replace those trees. But I think even where that's not happening, if we can look at opportunities for planting trees, for carrying out other work as well, coming back to the natural flood management agenda, there can be opportunities for building things like dams and things like that, which will capture water, but might also be very good in terms of boosting biodiversity. So those things, I think, have got to be really important in terms of our planning work. In the White Rose Forest group within the council, planners are involved with that, and we do discuss those things fairly frequently. There's also, I think, been a growing recognition that we need to look very carefully at the council's land assets. There has, as one of the downsides of austerity, or possibly a downside, there has been a move to sell off some assets just to generate the funds to keep council services going. But I think increasingly there is an understanding that we should look at any assets, especially pieces of land, and think about what is the best potential use for them. Would it be better retaining those pieces of land to develop woodland or other habitats that will have benefits both in terms of biodiversity and combating climate change? Would it be useful to do things like asset transfers with some of these pieces of land? So I do think we're genuinely becoming much more switched on to the opportunities there. Things that Dick raised, the Home Valley Forest, fantastic idea. I'm really pleased that Home Valley Council on Sunday are holding an event to which they've invited the general public to come along and look at things like this. This is just one of the areas where I think they're welcoming discussion. There's some good stuff happening in the Home Valley. I think River Home Connections have done some good work. There are other groups like HOT, who are really looking at these things, but we can take it further. I do take your point that there are some real challenges. Yorkshire Water, who are a major landowner, are tied by some of the long-term agreements that they've got for shooting rights. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what can happen about that. But there are other landowners who potentially have land that could be used for developing woodland and other habitats. And we are committed, I think, as part of the work that we're doing. One of the members of staff that Rob has described, part of their role will be proactively going out and talking to landowners to look at what we can do. Last Friday, the operation group that's looking at natural flood management in the uplands actually put in a bid for something called the Facilitation Fund. And that is directly to fund someone to go out, to make contact with landowners, to encourage them to take part in tree planting and other schemes to improve the environmental quality of their land. Ambition of 100% improvement, that would be fantastic. I think this is just a starting point. In the long term, I would like to be even more sort of looking at whatever we can do. I don't think there's any intention with our street tree management, to subcontract that out to private contractors. We're very keen that we will keep control of that in-house, because exactly the kind of experience in Sheffield, once you lose control of things, that's a recipe for disaster. And as you'll see, in terms of managing our wider woodland assets, we are looking at all sorts of different options. I'm extremely pleased that we're starting to look really seriously.
Can you start winding up, Rob? Sorry, I just want to give everyone... Is that right?
We're really looking at things like developing social enterprises to manage woodland, which again, Dick, I know that's something that you're interested in. Right, I'll shut up now.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks for the detailed response. Appreciate that. Normally at this opportunity, we would give a chance for public question time after a deputation. So obviously, I know there's a lot of members who want to come in, but I just want to give the opportunity here if there's a particular question that you might want to ask at this stage.
I'll be very brief, but...
Can you just use your microphone?
I'll be very brief, but I'd like to have some assurance that the council recognises the scale of opportunity of actually developing the green economy for Yorkshire and Humberside, in fact the whole north of England really, based on the Northern Forest. I mean, 50 million trees is a massive ask. 2 million trees a year is 1,000 times what the voluntary sector is planting at the moment. So it needs 1,000 Colne Valley Tree Societies, which means that actually only about 10% of that is achievable, and 90% will be contracted out, and the region doesn't have that scale of industry at the moment. So there's a scope for a whole new sector of the economy in Yorkshire and Humberside. It's massive. About 200 forestry workers, I estimate, will be needed to deliver the Northern Forest.
Thank you, Richard. Rob, did you want to quickly come back on that? And then I need to get the members in. Yeah.
We absolutely recognise the scale of the challenge. I think there is no doubt about that. But equally, I think there is some really exciting opportunities here. So in terms of social enterprise, in terms of ramping up tree production, in terms of involving schools, I was at a schools event yesterday where I was pleading with them to get in contact with us really so we could actually start ramping up programs in schools. I think there's opportunities for individuals to grow trees. I think there is a whole, a very much a mixed media opportunity here for us to do it, both in the commercial sector, the individual sector and the charity and third sector as well. So yes.
If I can just add something to that, something that's very close to my heart is about creating job opportunities and developing skills. Rob didn't mention that you've taken on, how many apprentices have you taken on, Rob? 15. And they're not just working in Kirklees, they are going to be spending some time with people like the National Trust to broaden their experience. And I'd like to see us doing a lot more of that.
Okay, thank you. I've got a few members to... I'm just going to take a few members, Naheed, if that's all right, and then I'll bring you in.
Okay, I just wanted to mention that the leader this morning, or was it last night, made a commitment council-wide about embedding the climate change and climate emergency. He's written, along with LGA, or all the councils, to 10 Downing Street. And what we need, whilst we're looking across our organisation, is for the government to help us in relation to funding, appropriate funding that would be needed, so we can do as much as we can. We need partners to come forward, and we need national government to enable us to have the budget to actually meet and ramp up the emergency we're in.
Thank you, Councillor Mather, thank you. I think I've got Martin first, John, Richard. Is everyone all right with that? And Andrew. Okay, I'm going to start with Martin.
Thanks, Chair. And just picking up on the point there about the leader's commitment, I trust that will extend also to his personal travel plans. If he's visiting Cannes or London, that he will look at sustainable travel. Sometimes, I use a more sustainable mode and get there before him, strangely. But I welcome this approach because Mirfield Town Council, which I'm a member, has been heavily involved for some time with tree planting. We recognised some while ago, but particularly after the Boxing Day floods of 2015, that in order to protect the environment in Mirfield and our businesses, we needed to look at natural flood management. Mirfield is at the confluence of the rivers Home, Colne and Calder. We've got no mechanisms of doing any engineering, so we need natural flood management to reduce it. So I welcome what's going in other areas. And I would suggest to Kirklees and to other parish councils that they might want to emulate what Mirfield Town Council have done and become a charter branch of the Woodland Trust. And then you then get access to tree saplings and start planting. The White Rose Forest has been mentioned, but I think we should also recognise that plays a wider part in the Northern Forest. And that's something which there is campaigns going on about extending that and getting government intervention. So we'll look forward to that. The interaction of Kirklees planning, I think that needs strengthening. I had a correspondence with the planning officer because I'd heard that a lot of protected trees on a site were being felled. And the tree officer said, well, we had to grant them a felling order because they'd got planning permission. Now, my understanding is that planning permission is a theoretical permission and is only actioned if everything else falls into place. So you don't have to give tree felling because somebody has planning permission unless they satisfy the other criteria, which could be alternative planting. As well, looking at the climate emergency and things, as I raised at Cabinet yesterday, was it? We should be looking at the environmental impact assessment. And I raise here, because we're talking about trees and forests, that plans from West Yorkshire and Kirklees about the Cooper Bridge bypass include the destruction of a huge swathe of the ancient woodland on the Kirklees estate. Trees that go back to the Middle Ages, if we believe that Robin Hood's grave is in the place where it says. But certainly looking at the trees, the huge swathe of them, the side of the A644, which the plan showed, but there was no mitigation in the consultation. And that was a point raised by residents, Spen Valley Civic Society and others. If you're going to build a new road, and the plans for that have not yet been fully explained, then we should be looking at the mitigation of planting now because, as I said, those are mature trees and the impact will be lost for some time. On page 161, it talks about the council's aspect with removal of trees for for drop crossings, and it says unless the tree can be relocated. I would suggest the chance in a lot of cases of relocating the tree is impossible because the mature trees at the side of many of our roads would not be easily moved. So I think we need to look at that it's a tree or an equivalence, because obviously the benefits of a mature tree as against saplings we've talked about, so we need to look at that again. I would like to see us as a council probably go further. We're doing this in-house on council managed land. Cabinet brought forward the supplementary planning document on highway schemes the other day, and we could have a supplementary planning document on woodland and tree management, so that the bodies that we've just talked about, the Yorkshire Water and Peak District, others that are privately owned in our area, would be covered under a planning document, so they would have to abide by that. Obviously they have their commercial aspects in place, but if they wanted to do anything, it would have to conform with our protocols, and I think that's something that we should be looking at in order to strengthen it, because again, the upland, the Pennine uplands that Yorkshire Water and others own has a direct impact on some of those that are further down. The issue we talked about, the council will not, well, just a final one, leaf fall from trees. The council will not prune or fell a tree on private ownership. Bearing in mind, again, our climate emergency, modal shift transfers, we've got things like the Spen Valley Greenway running and others, which are privately owned. If the council is getting leaf drop onto a non-motorised transport corridor, that's hazardous for the users and could therefore deter people, like myself who just cycled in today, from using those corridors because you're liable to fall off on the greasy leaves. So we need to look at that, balancing our climate emergency and modal shift transfers against this.
Rob, yeah.
Right, thank you very much, Councillor Bell. There was an awful lot in there. For chance of remembering all of that is fairly slight, so I'll work my way backwards if that's okay, and then you can remind me as my memory fails me. In terms of the management of private trees, that really is supposed to be about the management of private trees. If there are things, as you say, modal shift in terms of transport policy, they'd be assessed on an individual basis. I think that's a sensible way of addressing that. Then you talked about a lot about planning, didn't you? Yeah. Thankfully, I'm not a planner, but I will take those points on board and I will take them back to my planning colleagues, unless Councillor Walker wants to come in on that. So.
Just one thing to say about that. Yesterday afternoon, Rob and I were in the same meeting, the operations group meeting, the natural flood management meeting, and one very interesting comment, and this was a comment from the National Trust, Moors for the Future and Yorkshire Water, and they were saying how refreshing it is to work in Kirklees. They want to plant more trees, and we are making it as easy as possible for them to do that, as well as doing things like installing leaky dams, which have usually got sphagnum moss behind them, compared to other neighbouring local authorities. And the very heartening thing was that they were saying that that is going to possibly encourage them to spend more money here, which will help Murfield.
Okay, I think we've got those as many of Martin's answers question as possible.
Felling of trees for road schemes.
Okay, felling of trees for road schemes.
Sorry, to reiterate, Cooper Bridge bypass, all three schemes that were put out for the public showed the destruction of huge swathes of the historic Kirklees woodland with no mitigation. That's something we need to be looking at immediately.
Right, I will repeat what I said at the Cabinet meeting. I endeavour to find out what the impact of this, and I will discuss this with my colleagues and get back to you on it. Yeah, we should be doing that. I completely agree with you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. John.
Thank you. A couple of points. First, I broadly welcome the document. and I would hope that everybody would welcome this move forward. There's a couple of specific little questions I wanted to ask, really. I'll start off with the money question. So this sounds great, but do we have the money to do this? Because it sounds like we're going to have to invest a lot in trees, and potentially we may be changing the usage of some of the council-owned land, which presumably has an opportunity cost associated with it, so there's potential loss of income. Also, I'm not sure 2 people are going to do this, so presumably there will be more resources needed to support it, recruiting. And what's in budget? So do we have them? So what's in budget? Do we have the money to do it? Do we know how much we will need to do it? And, have we considered the loss of income if we do start changing usage of our land? So that's the money question. I've got some others. It's up to you how you want to do this. Yeah.
Right, thank you, Councillor. So in terms of budget, the actual money to plant the trees, that would all generally be grant funded. So the White Rose Forest has got a chap called Ewan. His role is predominantly to find grant funding. So we work out where the schemes are going to be, we design the schemes, and then Ewan then looks at funding that could potentially be used to do that. And we have a number of delivery partners as well, so people like the Woodland Trust, Yorkshire Wildlife Trust and so on, to help deliver that. So we don't have the money in budget, but we're spending, I think we've got 81,000 next year, which is a tiny amount, and then the following year there's a lot more, and then going forward that will be ramped up. And again, a lot of this will be around third-party land, so it's understanding how we can manage and support those relationships and actually to deliver those. In terms of land use, I think that is potentially a political decision as well, to decide where actually is the best use of our land. Yes, there will be some income issues. Grazing land doesn't produce a great deal of income. There are ways of looking at comparators that deliver sort of carbon benefits for land. Trees, I think, are about £595 a hectare per year in terms of carbon benefit. Grassland is about £300. This was done by a group called Rewilding Britain, so they've done some comparators. And again, when the Common Agricultural Policy changes, there is a look to change that. So potentially there will be payments for land use that will be for public benefit, not necessarily for food production. So there are some nuances around that as well. So potentially the council could look for that going forward. I agree with you, 2 people is not necessarily enough to deliver this. However, it is a start. It enables us to understand a bit of the scope and the scale. There are other officers who will be working on this. And as I say, a lot of this will be done in partnership with other groups as well. So it's understanding what the opportunities are.
Thank you on that one. I was just giving you an early opportunity to get your budget bid in. So just some other questions. You talk about in here where street tree felling is required, that you will consult with ward members, which is great. And it says it will only happen where there's agreement with all the elected ward members. I suppose my question is, what happens if one of them objects?
That's a very good question. It's evidentially based, so if there is an objection, we would look to change their minds. And again, it's also working with the members of the public as well, and interested groups and stakeholders. We do not take out trees lightly. As a council, we don't take out trees lightly, and as my department, we actually fight quite hard to keep trees. So there needs to be a strong evidential base to say why those trees need to come out.
My point is, the way you've worded the policy, you could trip yourself up. So I think you need to look at the wording of the policy again, because it suggests if one ward member objects, you can't do it, whatever evidential base you've got. So you might want to reword that a little bit.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. I will take that on board.
Just a couple of other points. In the next steps section on page 150, you talk about the people you're going to consult with on the policy, which is absolutely fine. I don't have any problem with that. But will that policy therefore potentially adapt as a result of that? And will that come back through here if there are any changes? Will we have any sight or knowledge that we've changed it?
Potentially there might be some adaptation to it. I think it's if Chair wanted to come back through here and Portfolio wanted to come back through here, then yes. And then my final 2 points. One is just
a suggestion. The uniform groups probably have a badge to do with tree planting. And perhaps we should be looking at how we can do some engagement across the district with all of the uniform groups, because I'm sure that'll be a way that we can get people on board with supporting us. And I'm a great believer in if we get children on side, they'll persuade parents into taking action. So I just think it's probably one to pick up and maybe have a look at. And then finally, just again on leaves, the joy of leaves at this time of year. Just when you're planning where we're going to plant some of these trees, we just do need to be mindful of the risk. I mean, Martin mentioned it about, him cycling and, going flying, which I'm sure we'd all find amusing. But, it's thinking through the consequences of where we plant those trees. So if we do some planting near K&H housing, if that's extra care homes where we've perhaps got elderly people who may be at risk of falls and, sort of breaking hips and things, we just need to think a little bit broader about that. And then my final point is around the town centre plan. I don't recall seeing lots and lots of trees in the nice pictures that we saw about it. So maybe we want to have another look at that again.
Okay, I think Councillor Mather wanted to come back on your last point there on the town centre, so I'll just let her answer that.
In terms of the town centre plans, there's going to be greening is part of the overall blueprint. So everywhere in the town centre, if you come out of the station, you will see new boxes with trees in, and we are going to be making sure that all the regeneration projects has a greening element. So don't worry, that's already been incorporated. But I wanted to just pick up an aspect of greening and leaves. I'm also thinking about experimenting with, rather than some large trees in some of our public realm, to actually do the bonsai type, the small. So if we put them in boxes already, we're making sure that the root system is contained, but we could also do different types of gardens to demonstrate what we can find across the world, because I think this morning we had Civic 3 being pulled up for a different kind of planting, and we can, if at all possible, I'm looking at Rob, we could try some of that as well.
Just come back on the town. So the picture I have in my mind is the picture of the piazza, where we've taken the piazza down. It's a huge, big grassed space. There don't appear to be many trees on it. It might be green, but it's grass, it's not trees.
It's going to be a beautiful park. It hasn't actually been planned, but it will be landscaped as an open space. It's going to be our town centre park. And I'm sure we will manage to make it a beautiful place.
Okay, did you want to come back on anything there, Rob? Did you? But I do want to bring our other members in. They've been waiting patiently.
Really quick, yeah. I think you're right. We need to look at those things really carefully in the town centre, and we should be looking at things like low walls using ivy, because it's extremely good at collecting particulates, which links in with the next item, and things like hedges. And coming back to the earlier point that Councillor Bolt made about planning, we should be looking at things like that and incorporating things like that into new housing developments, because they can make a real difference.
Okay, I think I've got Richard earlier. Did you want to ask anything? Are you're okay? So I'm going to bring Richard in. I think a lot of points have been covered. Thankfully there, and then we're going to bring in air quality after this point. Okay,
yeah, so I should have declared an interest actually, because my family do own some land in Golka, and we planted 6,000 trees working with the Combe Valley Tree Society, and Rob, who was there from the beginning planting trees. And basically, so I've got just a question actually, because I did note on page 178 and 179 you have kind of given some advice about spacing and guards. In our case, we needed deer guards, and obviously that does produce quite a lot of plastic. Thousands of guards. So I just wondered, if we are going to incentivise landowners whether there might be some sort of possibility for kind of the council offering you know, assuming the landowner gets them off, which obviously you need to do after a few years, then picking them up and recycling or whatever. So that's just one practical question, but it's actually quite an important one because for the landowner it's a big deal getting rid of these things. So that's the first question I would ask. The second one, really, just to pick up about the staffing capacity issue, and I take your point, 2 new staff's better than no staff, okay, but obviously there will still be a staffing committee issue, especially since I think, you know, the evidence is that the key to this is to get private landowners to engage. And I'm just really, in a way, this is a question for KSEG or anyone else who's watching this, which probably isn't that many, if we're going to be honest. But basically, you know, if we're going to do this, we've got to mobilise the community, haven't we? And I wonder whether there's scope actually for the council and community working together, you know. Perhaps, you know, going through the land registries in Kirklees will be a massive task, far beyond the capacity of 2 members of staff. You know, why not think about co-production and community activity? And obviously the same for planting, and as Rob probably remembers, when we planted that food hedge, Rob, which you may well remember, and by the way, I saw a guy actually picking some hazelnuts off it the other day, then basically this was done by 30 volunteers from our village. Okay, so it can, the interest there, it can be done, and I think in a way, yes, the council has to show a lead, but this has to be a responsibility of all of us to actually get stuck in.
So, yeah, I think a plastic take back bin, they are designed to be UV degradable, allegedly. My experience is that they don't, that they litter the landscape forevermore. I've no idea if the plastic they use is recyclable, but I think that's one of the things we should probably look at going forward to see actually if it's possible to get sustainable tree guards. We are probably, for most of the planting, not going to use tree guards. We may use things like jute mats underneath, which naturally degrade. Given that the sheer volume of trees we're looking in and the spacing that we're looking to put them in at is that inevitably there will be some losses, but that then gives you a mixed mosaic and habitat anyway, so it's almost like a natural woodland creation. And again, given the scale of the challenge facing us, the opportunity to go back and do normal silvicultural maintenance on some of these woodlands that will be established hopefully very quickly will be quite limited. So yes, we'll have to go back at some point, but the reason the spacings are quite wide is so you don't have to go in and do an initial thinning. And if we don't put tree guards, don't put stakes in, again, yes, there's an additional joy in not using plastics, and cable ties, one of my favourite things in the world that seem to litter the universe, won't get used. So there is a benefit to that, and we were providing advice to landowners. In terms of co-production, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that the more people we can get involved, the more people that become engaged with this, the better. We have 4 volunteer coordinators. They work with community groups. The whole concept behind them is to enable groups to do this. In terms of the detailed mapping, the reason that we do a landscape level assessment initially is it's quite broad brush. It then enables you to focus down, because if you don't need to know about a piece of land, why would you waste the effort about it? So it really is about saying, here is the entire Kirklees landscape, and here is it sitting in a regional context. So understanding some of the regional drivers, like Councillor Bolt has mentioned, if you live downstream of an upstream area, very inevitably, you want to manage the water upstream. There's no point trying to deal with that flood surge when it hits you. You ideally want to stop it from, appearing from the bogs and moors in the first place. So yeah, it is about that. And if anybody does want to get involved, and I'm sure we are massively viewed here, but if anybody does want to get involved, please do get in touch with us through the council. There's a Parks website or a email page. Get in touch. We would welcome those conversations.
For User wants to ask a question, so if you can be quick, and then I'll let Richard come in, and then we must get onto air quality.
It's more of a suggestion rather than question. What I was thinking was, someone touched upon the idea here already, is working with schools. So a lot of schools are very keen on developing their skill sets of their students outside of their academic ability. So, for example, I know that a lot of students pick geography as a GCSE. I mean, can we utilise sort of a programme whereby students can come and do smaller projects with yourself and partner up with yourself? You know, there's a lot of PSHE lessons where people are developed with their skill set as well. How would you suggest we can kind of help that, build those bridges and help you with that process? Because 2 officers, like everybody said, is not sufficient, but I know that you're working hard to develop other relationships as well.
You'd almost think that conversation had been planted there. I had to do an excruciating thing for me, which I'm uncomfortable with, as I was videoed for a schools competition. So we are going out to promote an inter-schools competition, which is relatively basic. It's about designing a planter, but actually it allows you to look at biology, let's look at geography, let's look at ecology, looks at material science, looks at urban design. There's all sorts of really interesting things about what is a relatively simple product. And the brief is design a planter for an urban situation that promotes pollinator species. So it's looking at that. What plants do you want? Then you can start looking at what the endemic wildlife is. You can start talking around what particular species are around at any particular time, what their food species are. So it's keying in the food species and the production of pollen and nectar for those particular food species at that particular time. So, and we are looking to put people into schools, if anyone's interested in doing this, to support them through that. Yesterday I was at and I forget what the name of the meeting was, but it was to talk around schools and the offer that we have to schools. The conversation veered then towards tree planting, and again, I've said if the headmasters groups want me to come along, I'll come along and talk to the headmasters groups, and also the schools and community hubs, for them to have an opportunity to ask us, how can we support them? And again, we would massively welcome people who want to get engaged with this. Because the idea behind all of this is eventually, it's not just about tree planting for tree planting's sake, it's around creating habitat corridors, and if you've got sites that allow stepping stones for species to move around the place, it's a far better thing. So.
Okay, colleagues are coming for another session as well, so we really do need to hurry up. So Richard, sorry about that. If you could quickly ask, just put your microphone, Richard, if you just put your microphone.
I'm an environmental scientist and an engineer going way back. Whenever there's a problem, it's actually an opportunity for innovation. So the 2 that came up there that I've been engaging with Rob actually, and I do need to engage with the other Rob. Tree leaves are not actually a problem, they're a huge resource for biogas feedstock. Alright, so at Cooper Bridge, at Honley, wherever there's a biogas plant, there's an opportunity for biogas feedstock, for grass cuttings, for tree leaves. They can be harvested. And the second thing is on plastics, again, an opportunity for innovation so that West Yorkshire Waste Management, the waste stream of plastic waste, can feed into producing recycled plastic tree guards, recycled plastic posts there must be tens of thousands probably that Kirklees use. I've put this to Rob before. There are actually 2 suppliers of recycled plastic tree guards, one in Chesterfield I think and another in Hull. So they're out there, the opportunities are there, and the problems are simply opportunities for innovation. Finally, we need to fast track all of this, halving the times. So 10 years is much, much too slow. 5 years maximum.
Thank you for your suggestions there, Richard. Very quickly, and then if I can get my air quality colleagues to start coming to the front so we can start moving things around. Did you want to say anything? Agree? Yeah, okay. Thank you. Okay, we're moving on to air quality now. So do we want to start, Wendy? Is that okay? So if you can give a quick presentation, then we'll go into questions. Thank you.
You'll have to excuse my enthusiasm because I am an environmental health officer. I've worked for the council a long time. It is probably the most exciting time to be in the council at the moment. I've sat in a lot of meetings talking about air quality, and people have switched off immediately as we've started talking about it. So it's really good that we're here talking to you about it, and actually that everything's interlinked. You know, climate emergency, air quality. I'll stop waffling now and move on. So why we're here? We're here to talk to you about the Air Quality Action Plan. And we're at the end, or coming to the end, of a very, very long process in relation to the Air Quality Action Plan. We are required by government to produce an air quality action plan if we have areas of poor air quality in the district. So this has taken some time to come together. It's been a very collaborative process working through it, and we've engaged with lots of partners and lots of people to produce the action plan. We are very excited about it. It is a live document. There is opportunity throughout to bring new things in as things change and new things come on board with it. So that's where we are with the action plan. It is in draft format because it won't be accepted until it's been submitted to the government, to DEFRA, to be accepted. And once we get that acceptance, then it will be seen as a formal document. We're going through the process at the moment, and we're hoping that we will be submitting it to DEFRA certainly before the end of the year. As I said, there are links with the climate emergency, and we are working very closely with the climate team. Both Martin and myself are form part of the climate emergency working group, and we've been working closely in relation to that. The document itself, by its very nature, is a long, very technical document. We are prescribed as to how it should be submitted to government. So unfortunately, we are constrained as to how it should be formatted. But we have, working with other colleagues in public health, formulated the air quality strategy, which is a lot more user-friendly, a lot easier to read document, and we will be submitting that and getting agreement for that at the same time as we go through the process. I just wanted to say we haven't got time, and we've even less time now. We've spoken about trees, but to talk about I think there's 176. Did you say, Martin? Individual, over 100 different individual schemes involved in actions in relation to it. So I don't intend that we'll go through each of one of those. We have, throughout the process, consulted with ward councillors, and we will be working really closely with the ward councillors and the public going forward. So by all means, there will be questions about individual schemes, but it's possibly something to come back to scrutiny about. I'll hand over to Martin now, who is a lot more technically knowledgeable than myself.
I think Wendy's just bought us all a lot of time because she's gone through quite ably the entire presentation. So we can all thank her for that. So just very quickly, just what is air quality? So not to confuse it with a lot of other agendas, it's certain pollutants in the air. It's felt very locally close to the emission source. It causes ill health in humans now. And the primary pollutants of concern, nitrogen oxides, fine particulates, and amongst others, but the two there are the main ones. It isn't carbon or other climate change gases, but the reasons that both are in the environment are linked. Obviously, carbon and climate change gases causes problems over the long term with climate change. Air pollution causes problems right now with people who are breathing in and causing ill health. But there is big links with the climate urgency, as Wendy says, and we're working very closely with those and hopefully more closely in the future. So what causes air pollution are the burning of fossil fuels, usually incompletely or not efficiently. Transportation is the primary source of air pollution in this district, as it is the world over. But also we shouldn't ignore industry, agriculture and domestic sources, such as burning in the open and home heating, especially the use of solid fuels, wood burners, for example. We measure air quality in Kirklees at around 80 sites. The locations that we monitor are based on traffic and congestion figures and other local factors. We know where the bad traffic is and our pollution, our poor junctions, so we target our monitoring to those areas. If concentrations go above the legal limits, we have to act by law, and we report all our monitoring to government each year through an annual status report which is published on our website. Air quality management areas, that's the term given to our pollution hotspots, where we have areas where pollution is above the legal limits. Legally then we have to produce an action plan in a government mandated format following government guidance. So I do apologise about the length of the document and the technical nature of it, but that's just, it is how it is. We have to report things in that format. As Wendy says, we have produced an air quality strategy, which is a bit more of an easily digestible form of the information that's in the action plan, and that's been to scrutiny before. In Kirklees, we have 10 air quality management areas. I don't intend to go through them in detail, but 8 were declared in the last 2 years, which has produced this action plan. And we've decided to produce an action plan for the whole district, including the 2 previous air quality management areas. So we're looking at individual actions in those 10 areas plus district-wide actions, which will benefit everybody. We took a collaborative approach to developing the action plan, hopefully be able to see through the report and the plan itself. That it's not just the council, we looked at our partners. We produced a project board of senior officers from a range of services in the council that all have an impact on the causes of air pollution: environmental health, public health, transportation planning, highways, fleet management, procurement, the green and carbon infrastructure and others. We held workshops for each of those departments to go through thread to needle our air quality problems in the district and how those individual departments either can help with positive benefits or reducing potentially some of the harmful activities that they're responsible for, such as transportation, unfortunately, is the moving around of vehicles which tend at the moment, unfortunately, to burn fossil fuels. We also held ward councillor meetings for all wards where air quality management area exists. We also held meetings with our key partners and institutions such as the health authorities, the university, our neighbouring local authorities, the Combined Authority and the LEP. And basically what we're doing in those workshops was just trying to work out what we could do to improve air quality, the things that they're doing now, things that they're planning and funded to do in the future, and ideas that we may want to try and find funding for in the future. We also went out to a public consultation. It wasn't required by law, but we decided that would be the best thing for Kirklees, so everyone has the opportunity to feed back in. For the action plan, what is it? Well, it presents all our monitoring and modelling data. It's a big table summarising our actions. Again, it's a summary table. I can't pretend that it's got all the detail in it, but we've tried to provide as much detail as we can for the purposes of the document. But if we need to discuss in future and scrutinise some of those individual actions, I'm more than happy to come back and talk about them. We've included and we've gone back over and tried to review and improve our measurables and our targets for each of the actions so we can identify how we can show success of each individual action or plan. Some of them may not be successful, but I think what we're trying to demonstrate through the number of actions in the plan is we're being ambitious in trying to try different and innovative things to try and improve the air quality. It is a large and complicated document. I apologise for that, but it needs to be. But there is the air quality strategy, which hopefully is easier to digest. And what we propose to do when it's accepted, it goes off to government and comes back, is we'll rework the air quality website to try and present the information in a bit more of an accessible format. As Wendy said earlier, it is a living and breathing document. It's not designed to be written, accepted and put on a shelf somewhere. What we intend to do is review it on a yearly basis. And as new ideas, new technology, new information comes to light, we'll add and take out actions from the action plan. And hopefully we'll continue the collaborative approach that we've taken to building the document in the first place, which is working with our internal departments, working with our partners and local councillors to come up with the best ideas and actions to improve air quality. Just quickly to summarise some of the things, the highlights of the action plan. What Kirklees have been doing up to now is leading on an Eco-Stars fleet recognition scheme, which is reducing emissions from HGVs and large fleets. Developing and expanding the scope of the West Yorkshire low emission strategy. We won some government money and employ an officer to review and deliver that, which is a fantastic document for the region to look at our emissions. We're starting the rollout of electric vehicle charge points. We were lucky in West Yorkshire to get some government money, and Kirklees with the benefit of 17 of those rapid charge points. We're adding to our own fleet of electric vehicles. We have either in production or actually on the ground now or in the capital plan 29 vans, 20 electric pool cars and 30 hybrid pool cars on order and are starting to be delivered. Working with the university and a company out of the 3M Buckley building on advanced traffic management to deal with air quality and other advanced traffic management solutions. In terms of working with our planning colleagues, extensive work through the local plan to assess each site in relation to air quality and the impact on traffic through a strategic model. There's a chapter in the local plan on air quality, which I was very pleased about. Development of supplementary planning documents, which is there to deliver the detail. We're working heavily with our local plan colleagues and the planning policy officers to develop local plans to effectively make sure that air quality is considered on a decision-by-decision basis through planning. Kirklees was at the forefront in planning, requiring each new development to have electric vehicle charge points. We've been doing that for at least 3 years, and that's now been rolled out nationally as part of government guidance. But we were well ahead of the curve there. And again, assessment and damage costing of large planning applications and mitigation included on schemes, and where they can't be mitigated on site, to look at what off-site mitigation we can employ. Transportation, using the investment of the West Yorkshire Plus Transport Fund to assess and where possible improve air quality in relation to these schemes. Install electric vehicle and bicycle charging within schemes. Use of the LC Whip and City Connect to improve walking and cycling in the district. Working with a combined authority on workplace, school travel, promoting public transport. And the Bus Technology Fund, again, that was a local success in getting money from the government to look at retrofitting buses to make them cleaner. Looking at partners and public, what we intend to do is ramp up our publicity campaigns to communicate with the public about air quality and climate change, the uptake of low emission transport, walking, cycling, public transport, low emission, zero emission vehicles. Looking at domestic fuel, especially solid fuel use, we need to reduce that or make it especially more efficient. Idling vehicles, and especially outside schools, we've got ideas and programmes to work up on that. The Huddersfield Heat Network will be a massive benefit in terms of emissions, and all this comes under looking at government grants and how we can fund all this. Again, developing a toolkit and the use of modelling and monitoring outside schools to help them deal with the problem of anti-idling. What does success look like?
I think just to finish off there is we've highlighted how we feel that success would be, and it's clearly that we remove the air quality management areas, that we improve the air quality in those areas, but also that we make modal shift in relation to what people do, how people act, and how we travel more sustainably and reducing congestion. So that's it from us. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm just going to ask a quick question, and I'll bring members in as well. My question is just around schools. Obviously, you know, it's quite an important issue in terms of air quality for young children. And we do struggle at the moment in terms of looking at alternative routes of transport because, you know, for parents, it is tricky, especially if you've got kids going to different schools. You know, car usage is what majority of parents are doing, residents are doing. One of the key issues is around idling at schools as well. I'd like to see, like, you know, some really clear sort of policies and guidelines around that. And I know that is going to be a struggle with some schools, it really is. But could you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I never went to school. My parents never took me to school by car. I think I'm old enough to be able to say that. Yes, I think it was a struggle before. I think there is certainly a shift in how people think about it. It is something that we're working on. I was looking at something yesterday that a London Borough had done, which is an excellent piece of work. They've said we can pinch it with pride, and we will look to do that. Certainly we are working up on something to work with schools and work with school children. I think there is a shift towards it, and we're coming to the time of year when people will have their car engines running outside schools. We would ask that you don't do that.
Just very quickly, we've just literally placed an order for some new air quality monitors, which are designed, they're very mobile, but look at pollution on a second-by-second basis. And our intention is to use those to put them on lampposts and outside schools, so we can demonstrate to, as part of this toolkit, show them the evidence that, you know, at the point when people are coming to school, leaving their cars island, there's the big spike in air quality. I think without the evidence to demonstrate that air quality is actually a problem at these times, it's difficult to change the hearts and minds of people. So it's a big part of our plans. It does take time to get there. It's quite resource intensive to do that, because one solution for one school will be different for another one. So we need to not just sort of wag our fingers and tell them what they should be doing. It's thinking individually about individual locations, coming up with the right solutions, and then working through and implementing them. But it is in our plans, definitely.
So I've got Andrew first. Okay, so Andrew.
Right, thank you very much for this very comprehensive report. Well, it's quite hard work to get into. And obviously there's quite a lot of responses in the back here. A number of them raise the issue of planning controls and integrating new developments with cycleways and public transport and footpaths. It feels a bit like you're sort of chasing after the ball, really. A lot of recommendations in here to do that, but there's been quite a lot of development recently in the district where that hasn't happened. You know, North Lindley's full of new housing with very poor public transport, where people are using cars to get kids to school, schools that are increasingly at a distance from where they live. So that there really hasn't been sensible leadership in that space, and you sort of have a chase after that as we go forward. I was surprised to see your comment about solid fuel stoves in Kirklees neighbourhood housing in terms of bunging up chimneys. These are relatively poorly insulated houses given the age they were built in. Have you considered the issue of fuel poverty in those premises and the issues for residents in removing those heating devices? Because warming a single room is often the pragmatic solution to keeping the family comfortable in a large house which isn't necessarily well heated. I suppose the other question was total resources. I mean, how many people are working on this? So I used an analogy earlier on which sort of said it feels like you're fighting a load of giants and you've been given a pea shooter and a bag of peas, and you're trying to hit lots of targets with the peas, but they're bouncing off because there's lots of stuff here, and lots of it's very, very good. I'm not criticise it, but it's just trying to have enough impact with all of that. So how is the resources organised and focused? I wonder whether working on a smaller portfolio of things and having a bigger impact in that area to show people some leadership would be more effective.
Thank you. I take your comments on board 100%. There's, unfortunately, sometimes when you have a policy document like this, it contains a lot of broad brush policy statements that obviously when you drill down into the detail on an individual site-by-site basis, different decisions will be made, and I take into account your comments about fuel poverty very much in that regard. I think not one, as I said before, not one solution will fit all circumstances, and it's important that we don't do anything that has a secondary negative impact. In terms of your comments regarding planning, yes, I can't say that we've done everything correctly in the past, but the whole point of having an air quality strategy and an air quality action plan is that decisions will be made differently in the future. And we're working very hard with our planning colleagues to do that. And I think there is a fundamental shift, especially with the climate emergency and how air quality has come high up the agenda, that there's a shift in the right direction now. As Wendy said, it's an exciting time to work in environmental issues because they are coming much more up into the forefront. And your last comment about resources, again, that's a moving feat. So up until very recently, there was only half an officer working on air quality. We've been luckily been able to increase that to 3 officers will be working on air quality soon. But one of the points that I want to make is that a lot of these actions aren't the responsibility of the air quality team to implement. The reason that we worked across the council within our partners because the responsibility cuts across the entire authority. So probably if you added up all the responsibility, there'd be a significant amount of resources across the authority and outside in partners working on improvements. But I 100% take your point that we need to show leadership in the air quality team and public protection to make sure it is always high up the agenda, and that decisions that others are taking take into account the environment, air quality and the climate.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to try and spend another 10 minutes on this, and then we do need to move on to homelessness as well. So just looking at my list now, I've got Richard, John, Ailey, Martin, and I know Councillor Mather wanted to come in as well. So
okay,
start
yeah.
with Richard.
So I mean, there's so much here, isn't there? But I'll just try and focus on 3 issues. The first, I wanted to just ask you on, so it's page 39 of the table, page 51 of the bundle, about taxes. And I just wanted to ask, I mean, obviously, in order to change behaviours, there's either the carrot or the stick usually, isn't there? And so I just wondered, have you considered incentivising electric vehicle use, I don't know, reduce licence fees, or I don't know if there's a waiting list to get a licence anymore, but if there is, would they go to the top of the queue? So that'd be my first question. The second question is about, well, it's just an observation as much as anything, because I appreciate that this was written, partly a lot of what shaped it is a response to create AQMAs in certain areas, 10 areas, wasn't it? And I appreciate that that's shaped the format of the report and all the rest of it. But I think, Martin, you kind of were getting there about, how you can have monitors outside schools measuring short-term spikes. Because I just felt when I read it, it was a bit opaque, actually, about the scale of air pollution outside of the AQMAs. And really, I think the people of Kirklees need to know, because just because that hasn't been triggered, it doesn't mean that air pollution isn't a serious issue. Do you know what I'm trying to say? So if you could, I don't know if it might be possible to get that in report in some intelligible, easily understood way. That might be good to get it out there. And the final question is about clean air zones. Okay, so this is, you refer to this on page 61 on the table, and also on page 30 in the preamble, where you you say, well, I think to quote, you said it isn't delivery would not be feasible for a chargeable clean air zone. Could you just explain why that it wouldn't be feasible? And because obviously this would be an effective measure. I appreciate it'd be a controversial measure, but it would be an effective measure. So could you just explain why, please, and what circumstances you think that kind of approach could be introduced? So those are my 3 questions.
Right, we'll do this as a double act. So I'll start with the taxes. Fortunately, as well as being an environmental health officer, I also look after licensing and the taxes. So I can influence this side of things. And it is a little bit around regulation and a little bit about persuasion as well. So we have just brought in a West Yorkshire document for taxis, and we are also looking at the vehicles themselves and bringing in a West Yorkshire policy for that. And as part of that, we will be looking at the emissions and looking at encouraging the use of cleaner vehicles. The Leeds have been required to have a clean air zone, and taxis will be required to comply with that clean air zone. That will impact on taxis from other West Yorkshire areas, and we have noticed that there is a move towards not necessarily all electric, but certainly a lot of more hybrid vehicles than we had previously. So it is something we are looking at, and we are looking to regulate but also encourage as well.
And just to finish up on that point, as part of the money that Leeds got in response to their requirement to have a clean air zone, it was introduced a scheme to give grants and loans to taxi drivers to try and help move the shift from combustion engine to electric vehicles. There was a legal challenge to that because the scheme was only limited to Leeds licensed drivers. So the challenge was successful, and now they've been required to extend the scheme outside of just the Leeds city boundary. So potentially taxi drivers or licensed drivers from Kirklees will be able to take advantage of that scheme. The detail isn't there yet because it's been a very recent decision. So there is things moving afoot, but it's a very expensive scheme to administer. I think £30 million is the price tag for just the incentive one alone. The second point was on clean air zones. So clean air zones are probably the biggest tool in the arsenal to change, improve air quality, but it comes with a lot of other costs, and not just costs in terms of trying to implement it, but sort of economic costs associated with it. There's only, I think, 5 or 6 areas in the country that have been required by the government to institute clean air zones, and a significant amount of money's gone into doing the feasibility studies around that, and then doing the implementation of it as well. And those areas have got significantly worse air quality problems than Kirklees has. So in terms of the gulf between where we are and where they are, there's a big gap. So having a full charging clean air zone, looking at the government guidance around that, we just wouldn't meet the criteria. And if we could invest a lot of money doing a feasibility study, and I'm sure what the outcome would be. There is a line in there about looking at the feasibility of a voluntary clean air zone. I think that's definitely worth exploring, but I think it needs to be caveated with what's the pros and cons of doing that. We're just not there in terms of a charging one. And then the third point, just go back to your monitoring. I think there's always, historically especially, we had a finite budget in terms of where monitors were going, and we had to try and target those locations where we felt the air pollution was going to be worse, to try and identify where they were to do something about it. There is a commitment in the action plan and a commitment in the strategy to increase the level of monitoring. And like I said, we've just bought some new ones. We're looking to expand the network of monitors to try and identify if there's other pollution hotspots, and to be able to prove and give confidence to everybody, the public, councillors, that where the air quality is actually okay, and that's a good thing, and hopefully we'll have a better picture. But we can't monitor everywhere, unfortunately. We've got to be targeted.
All right, I'm aware of time, so please be mindful with your questions and responses. Okay, so John.
Yeah, I'll try and be quick. Firstly, I like the action plan. I commented on it when it came out. But my worry is it does feel as though it's not integrated with the other strategies and policies across Kirklees. And I think that's where the challenge lies. So if I just quote a couple of examples, there's a lot of talk about how we can reduce pollution by encouraging people to work from home. But there's no linkage in the economic strategy towards promoting that outside of the urban district. So it's almost all the investment, all the focus goes in the urban district, so there's an expectation we commute into the urban district. If you want to get gigabyte, sort of speed of the internet, you've got to go into the urban areas to get it. So it's actually, the economic policy is perversely encouraging people to commute. And, planning policies as well. I'm sure we've all got examples in our own wards or more broadly where, developments have been brought forward with inadequate infrastructure provision, which have gone through and we know are going to make the congestion on roads worse, the congestion at junctions worse. So there's like a complete mismatch between the ambition of the policy and actually the actions elsewhere within the council. The other point I would make is around public transport and buses. You talk about wanting better buses, cleaner buses, but I see nothing that's going to achieve that. And, I represent a more rural ward where, we don't get very many buses. Yorkshire Tiger are atrocious in terms of the quality of the buses they provide. And in terms of, if you're ever stood there when the buses, passengers are getting on, you've got the emissions coming out of the back of them. They're in very poor quality anyway. So I just think the ambition's there, the intent's there, but I'm not sure the rest of the council's with you at the moment. Thank you.
I think anybody that knows me in the council knows how passionate I am about this, so we will bring them along, I can reassure you. Martin is equally passionate about it, so yeah, I take on board your points about that, but yeah, we are moving as a council, the climate emergency, we're going clean and green, and it is embedded throughout, and I'm sure we'll see a step change in relation to what you've said. In relation to planning policy and building houses, we need homes. We've all got. I've got children. I would like them to live with me for the rest of their life. They don't want to do. But even if they live with me, they will have a car. So just because we've got homes doesn't mean that we'll get more cars. We're hoping that what people will do will move towards sustainable transport. We will, as a nation, because we have to do. There are other pressures on us. So, we can't stop it immediately, but we are working towards it, I think, is the answer.
Thank you. I'm going to move on to Early and then Martin. If you ask your questions, please be mindful of time, and then we need to bring housing colleagues in.
Okay, I'll try and be brief. I think I just wanted to second the point about bus routes. About buses generally being cleaner and greener, but I think also I couldn't see anything in here, sorry if I missed it, about expanding bus routes. I think the majority of people I've spoken to about transport in Kirklees say that they can't take the bus because they have to walk for miles. So I think it's all very well making the buses greener, but if there's no bus for half an hour walk of your house, everybody drives. And I think similarly with schools as well, I find it just terrible that everyone's driving their kids to school. However, at the same time, adding in comments that I think Martin would agree with, at the moment, every time I cycle in Huddersfield, which is regularly, I do expect to die. So I think that needs to be looked at quite urgently. Like I can completely understand why people, and I cycle in London as well, and I'd rather cycle there than here. But the sort of extra point is on this, there are quite a lot of different measures, and there are quite a lot of things that have been implemented or the renewals of previous strategies, and I think I'd be keen to find out a bit more about what actually works and what delivers value for money. So there's lots of I think lots of this was kind of tweaking, etc., but things like it talks about having in all the different bikeability schemes or different things trying to encourage modal shift, but what actually works, or does it take a national consciousness of people sitting around the streets protesting about climate change to make things work? I don't know.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Unfortunately, I think there are a lot of things here which look good on paper, but don't translate into reality. This suggestion on page 16 of schemes which have been successful, and earlier and others have mentioned bikeability. Yeah, we train kids for bikeability but you only train them to level 2 in Kirklees. It's level 3 to go on busy roads. You train them to cycle, but then don't put the facilities in either at the school or on the highway to get them there. And removing cars from around school is a big challenge. It mentions Calder Valley Cycle Scheme as a success. But that is not a success because it's not complete, and Sustrans have had to use some money that they've got from government, some of the 21 million, to fill the gap in the Calder Valley cycle route because money was taken out by Kirklees and used on other schemes without completing it. So you're not going to get children cycling along a route if it's dangerous. The Calder Valley, and again I've raised it with officers, the Calder Valley cycle scheme crosses one of the busiest roads in Kirklees, Bog Green Lane, that feeds into Cooper Bridge. Officers won't put a signalised control crossing because there's not enough pedestrians there. Well, no, that's because it's a cycle and horse riding predominant route. So if we want to be serious, we need to look at what other areas are doing. It's been mentioned about vehicle idling. That's an offence under Section 42 of the Road Traffic Act. I've just Googled it. So we shouldn't be talking about what can we do to encourage. Go around St George's Square or other places where we have taxi and private hire queuing. Yeah, we control their licences. It should be a condition of licence and use that you don't idle. And similarly, yeah, we can use carrot and stick outside schools. Yeah, do you know it's an offence? Let's look at some of the natural measures we've talked about. Well, I mean, it's a big issue, but if we don't want to hear we need to hear the things. What's the comparator between natural measures of absorption, such as planting trees and saplings, and other measures that have been used, such as that West Yorkshire Combined Authority invested in a moss wall on the way into Halifax? And can we use those kind of schemes in our AQM areas, such as Eastborough, where there is a big wall behind it? Looking at the map there, that's a problem of highway congestion. Fully agree with the ridiculous situation. We spent £3 million basically giving Arriva retrofits, but Arriva will not run a direct service between Huddersfield and Leeds, which would alleviate some of the problems of traffic congestion and air quality. Yep. Again, direct question, I'm still waiting for a reply, Martin. How are the private tests? You can go and get a NOx or other tube from the Friends of the Earth. How are they validated to make sure that the place that somebody says they put them is accurate? Can somebody just put a NOx tube up, can I put one on Huddersfield Road, Murfield, and then submit it and say does it have to be validated in any way? Because these are things that people are looking at.
Okay, I think we're going to have to give them an opportunity to answer these questions, Martin.
Yep, and again, just the point of leadership, I'd like to see Kirklees showing leadership, not only by making, talking about electric charge points, again we referred to before, Kirklees should be having electric pool bikes and fitting chargers so that somebody going from Huddersfield to Dewsbury could go along one of our cycle routes and use electric bike rather than using a car, etc.
Very quickly, a number of points were raised there, and I think I'll go back to something I said earlier. I think, there's a lot of individual actions in there that you could say have been good or bad or successful or unsuccessful. And I think what we need to do is, if there's individual topic areas, is bring that back to scrutiny and have an entire session on individual items, because it's very challenging to sort of go through a massive range of all the impacts on air quality or all improvements on air quality and speak in general terms where there's actually quite specific answers. So I'd welcome you identifying a range of topics that are brought out from the action plan to scrutinise in depth, and we can try and get to the bottom of what we need to do to improve in the future. In terms of evidence-based, there's a lot of evolving evidence around air quality, because again it's it's very topical, so there's a lot of investment in terms of research. And one of the benefits that we have in terms of the Low Emission Strategy Officer is we're working in Kirklees at reviewing an evidence-based. The NICE, the National Institute for Clinical Excellence, produced a very good document analysing, I think, over 1,000 studies about the pros and cons of certain measures in terms of air quality, and produce a very interesting report about what does work and what doesn't work in terms of the underlying evidence base. And we're using that to try and target more evidence-based interventions in the future, because quite a lot of what's gone on in the past has been somewhat of shot in the dark, because it's perceived that it may work, but what is the evidence actually supporting that? For example, moss trees is a good one. I think there needs to be a lot more evidence to demonstrate, is it worthwhile to spend X amount of money on a moss tree? What's the benefit that going to be? Is that going to actually absorb the pollution or not? And we would like to trial these things to help build the evidence and then spend the money in the right places.
Thank you, Martin. I'm going to ask our housing colleagues to come to the front. Thank you very much for your presentation. And I don't know if we've got a presentation that we need to set up for them. Councillor Mather just quickly wanted to come back, didn't you, on that point?
Okay. First of all, I'd like to say to Martin that critical challenge is all well and good, but occasionally we need to be able to praise ourselves for the initiatives we are taking or hoping to take. I can say that we will deliver. We're hoping to make sure that air quality, along with climate change, is high up on our agenda, is embedded across the organisation. I want to be able to praise our staff for this very clear and very long document. I don't apologise for the length because it is detailed. I do want to say thank you for doing such a good job, Martin, and all the staff, that includes Wendy here. I want to be in Kirklees, I want us to be the exemplar that delivers across. But when we're talking about climate emergency, climate change, and issues embedded across larger organisation, I want people to recognise we're about people, places and partnerships, and it requires all of us to work together. So when we're doing well, we need to be praised. When we need to be challenged, we need it to be critical, but we need to also always remember we're in Kirklees, and if we don't shout how good it is and how good we're trying to be, then nobody else will. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lovely response. So we're going to move on now to our housing colleagues. We're going to just introduce the paper. This is an update, so colleagues have been with, I've come to this panel a fair bit now. I think it's the third time you come in, but I know members did want to get an update given that it's such an important issue. So if you want to introduce it, and then we'll go to questions.
Okay, thank you. I'm Helen Gelder, I'm the Head of Housing Services, and with me today I've got colleagues Donna Harkins, who's the new Rough Sleeper team manager. We'll come on to talk about that Rough Sleeper team and the work that they're doing in a little while. Karen Oates is with us as well, who was instrumental in leading the development of the strategy. So again, Karen's with us. And Naz Parker is the Service Director for Growth and Housing, I'm sure you all know. So, we don't have a presentation today, but I just wanted to introduce the report. As being said, it is an update. So, the strategy was approved by Council in July this year, so we've not had much time to work on the action plan, which was agreed at Council that we would do. That doesn't mean to say that we've sat back and done nothing, because actually, for a number of years now, we have been working together with partners and others in order to try and prevent and tackle homelessness. So what we're doing in terms of trying to develop an action plan now with our partners is to build on that good work and to actually do more and to work out what it is that we can do to actually improve the life of Kirklees citizens even more. The report, as I say, it doesn't cover the sort of work that we've been doing on a day-to-day basis for a number of years now around prevention. What we've tried to cover is some of the work that we've started to do since, if you like, the summer in terms of moving forward. So the report outlines, if you like, a little bit around what we're doing with the Kirklees Homelessness Forum partners to develop that overall action plan. And what we intend to do is to bring that action plan back so that when it's being developed a little bit further, so that people can actually comment and provide us with any further information about activities or actions or initiatives that perhaps we should be taking that we've missed. So we'd like feedback again from people on that, and we will be bringing that back. That will be monitored and reviewed once it's been approved to make sure that we can evidence that we're actually having the desired impact in terms of tackling homelessness in the district. So the report itself actually just goes out to outline a little bit, in a bit more detail, some of the more proactive work that we've been doing. And some of that relates to some very positive results in terms of bids that we've made to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government for funding. So we were successful in gaining around just short of £250,000 for work to tackle essentially the sort of rough sleeping, or those people that are living a street-based life in Kirklees. And as I said, Donna is the team manager of that new team. It's only a small team, but it's been we've been building it since May this year. But they're developing a much more holistic approach to, and a very proactive approach to going out onto the streets to work with people who are living that street-based life, to really work with them to understand the issues, to develop trust and build a positive working relationship. That also includes working very much across the partners in Kirklees, who are also keen to work to develop good practice in terms of working with this particular group of people. The report also includes work that Donna and the team are leading in further other partnership work. So we've started making connections with health colleagues around some of the, for example, sex workers and the hidden homelessness of sex workers. So we're trying, whilst they might not be on the street, they're probably living in very insecure accommodation. So we've started to build up working relationships with the people there so that we can try and help those people. There are other examples in the report about the work that we're doing with police and others as well, which I know you've had a chance to read the report, so rather than me talk to you, we'll have time for questions. So I did just want to point out that there is a couple of case studies that we circulated to you confidentially. There was a bit of a concern because of the small cohort of individuals that they could be identified if we included them in the report. But if you read those, it gives you a little bit of a flavour of the type of work that the team has started to do and the work that we're taking on. Also, I think we've mentioned at previous meetings the partnership work that's been led by Homeless Link, who are a national organisation in Kirklees, to develop a good practice guide for outreach work. That document and that outreach work, good practice, has now been published, and it has been shared with our elected members, but we've included it here so that other people can see the work that's been going on there as well. There is an error in your report which I wanted to bring to your attention. In the section where we're talking about the new Tenant Finder Plus initiative, we say that we've received £10,000 from MHCLG to instigate a new service. It's actually 120,000, so apologies for that mistake. But we have commissioned that service with Fusion Housing, who are a trusted partner of ours, and we work with them quite closely. And they're working with a group of single people who don't necessarily have very high needs, but do struggle to actually access accommodation. And then finally, we've just put a little bit in around the severe weather emergency protocol arrangements. I know a panel previously have had quite a lot of input into us developing and improving that service really. It is ready, it is in place now, so if and when we need to activate the protocol, we will do to make sure that people can access a bed in conditions where it's extreme weather. So really over to you. Any questions, we're happy to try and answer.
Thank you very much, Helen, that's great. Have we got any, well, I've got John, yeah?
It's comments more than questions, really, Helen. Just welcome the report, congratulate you and the team on the work that you're doing, and the new team that Donna's set up, and you're already having some impacts. And you're saying that a third of the people you've engaged with so far, you've managed to get into some form of accommodation, which is actually a really, given the nature of the challenges that you face with, that's a really, really positive outcome, isn't it? Also, in the same section, there's kind of a positive and the negative at the same time, isn't there, where we're predicting that when we look at the numbers this year, the numbers will probably be up. But that's because you've been doing that work to actually identify the people. So in a sense, it's a positive because we've got a better handle on how many people need our help and support. But yeah, at the same time, it looks like a negative, doesn't it, if the numbers have gone up. But really, congratulations on that. And I'm also pleased to see the bit about that extra work that you're doing, sort of reaching out to prisons and people like that, where you're identifying people before they land on the street homeless to try and intervene in that early stage. So I think there's an awful lot in this report to, sort of acknowledge and say, yeah, it looks like you're doing an excellent job, so well done.
Chair, can I just add something? Because It's a really important point that Councillor Taylor makes, because it might look like performance is worsening, but actually performance is getting much better, simply because we now know more. We know the individuals more, we know where they are, we know the agencies that are dealing with them. So that's, a commendation to the team's hard work in getting that outreach, really well established to be able to support more individuals. So whilst it might look like the numbers are going up, it's actually a good thing, because it enables us to provide that support and that more intensive support in a different way, and then deliver better outcomes for the district.
Thank you for that. I think Kathy wanted to come in as well, so I'll just ask her to come in.
It's a standard joke. So, no, I'd just like to commend the officers for this report. And John, you're absolutely right. There's a positive and a negative. However, the intelligence is greater, and it's showing a good partnership, working relationship. And can I just also recognise the work that Scrutiny's done working with us on this? It should be commended, because without your helping and shaping it, Martin, Rob, all of you that were here at the initial part of this, we've come here a long time now. We should be Scrutiny members. But no, I'd just like to thank Scrutiny, because you are our critical friend. We do embrace what you do say, and we try and shape the policies and things that we do around you. But with regard to the SWEP, it's a message to go out there. It was initiated from the 1st of October, so it's in place from the 1st of October. Any other information that you need, you can come to me, come to officers. It's there, it's to hand for you. So thank you.
Yusra.
I want to congratulate you all. It's a fantastic project, fantastic initiative. You're working really hard, coming from a mental health professional background. I know a lot of people that are at risk of homelessness, whether it's down to austerity or whether it's down to the mental health. So I'm really, really pleased to hear that in Kirklees we're adapting this and we're taking it forward. And just anything we can do to help and support you in this initiative, taking it forward. We've already had a contact from constituent from one of the organisations you mentioned, so it's a fantastic way of us working together to try and prevent homelessness. And like not the individual said, the numbers are going up because we're identifying homelessness as an issue. So yeah, thank you very much.
Martin.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Thanks for the update. One query and one suggestion, if I could. The query, it's probably my understanding of it, that on page 185, when we talk about the SWEP, it talks about everybody being given a meal voucher at the Huddersfield Mission. Just for my understanding, so if there's a rough sleeper in North Kirklees, are they brought to Clare House? And then if they have a support network or anything, a regular place in North Kirklees, how do they get back there subsequently? The request or suggestion is on the vulnerable groups on page 193, something I mentioned before. Can we make sure that we detail, I know we do it, but can we make sure that it's detailed, our interaction for the ex-military? If somebody homeless, somebody rough sleeping, a response for a vulnerable group, we know that our ex-military have particular problems, and that needs to be identified, that we do work with them and signpost them.
On the SWEP provision, obviously if there is somebody identified, we would make sure that they can get to the SWEP provision, which is in Huddersfield, and if we do provide bus passes so that people can get to us, or we'd actually arrange people to come over. Then obviously the next day, because it is in Huddersfield, it would be to the mission, but then once it's at the mission, the officers would go down and work with those individuals and make sure that we've got an appropriate next step for them, and that would include making sure that they can travel to wherever they need to go to. Military, we'll include that. In fact, I was just talking to Catherine yesterday, and she was at a planning session on the military covenant and action planning and what we can do to include and do more for ex-military, which we would be aware of, but we'll certainly make sure we reference them as a particular group in future, certainly.
Just on the military, so MHCLG in partnership with, I think it was MOJ, Ministry of Justice, asked local authorities to bid into a fund to work with veterans. As a combined authority and as a region, we took a view that I think there was about 90k on offer, and if we were all kind of going to get tuppence halfpenny, we weren't going to make the impact. So what we decided to do was to work as a combined authority and as a region to respond to that. So Leeds act on behalf of the region as the lead body. I think they took the 90k, and then we, not for Leeds, but for the region. And so we work collectively in shaping the response, and Leeds ensure that through their central coordination point that they refer back out to the districts where appropriate if the local connection is established or the veteran wants to establish that local connection. So we are working with our partners as well as looking at something bespoke more locally. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, just a quick question from me. I guess firstly just to say, you know, having read through the report, I think it's brilliant. You're absolutely going in the right direction. The holistic support that you're doing and the work now that we're doing on the street as such, I just think absolutely spot on. That's what we need to be doing. You mentioned about the provision in North Kirklees and potentially looking at some provision there, really, and that's where we're perhaps lacking a little bit at the moment. So I don't know if you can just say something about where we are with the planning for that. And then I always ask this question, it's just, and it might be again still tricky to answer, but have we ever been in a position where we can't basically provide overnight accommodation for a rough sleeper, or, you know, are we comfortable in saying that we have enough provision locally to night by night to cover that, or do we have to send someone out of borough if that's the situation at the moment?
I think just in terms of the severe weather and whether we've had enough sufficiency, I think in the past we might not have had enough sufficiency on a particular night with the provision, but what we've done on those occasions is made sure that people can access bed and breakfast accommodation on that evening, and then look to you know, relocate them the next day. So we've never had to, with SWEP provision, to go out of area. There may be occasions in terms of us providing temporary accommodation for other individuals for a variety of reasons where it's not appropriate to provide temporary accommodation in this district for their safety, where we do place outside. But obviously wherever we can, we'll try to do that within Kirklees boundaries.
And then just about the North Kirklees.
And then the North Kirklees, yeah, we do have Clare House in Huddersfield, which is a fantastic facility. We do recognise that in North Kirklees there is a gap and we don't have anything like that. So we are constantly looking at what we can do to provide that. We're working with a partner at the moment, trying to look at whether or not we can create another similar type of provision. And we're always looking to our partners to see whether or not they can help us to provide that accommodation. And we are actually looking to provide additional temporary units of our own, which don't necessarily have the support, but we need more of everything, yes, especially in North Kirklees.
Yeah. Hello, thank you. I just wanted to pick up as well in terms of the cold weather, and it does reference it in the report that there is some funding available through MHCLG, particularly around cold weather provision, which obviously we will be looking at in Kirklees to look at accessing that. But I think another benefit of that funding is it's very much around health, social care and housing working together to work up a bid that sort of really touches all of those agendas. So I think that's a really important point in terms of strengthening those arrangements with partners and making sure that preventing homelessness is actually on everybody's agenda. Thank you.
Sorry, quick question from me. It just is on the cold weather definitions or SWEP about the 3 nights. Is that a local or a national definition?
That's a national definition, but what we do in Kirklees is that we're flexible with it. So it refers to temperature, but what we also do is we look at, if we look at rain, the weather that from that point of view as well. So we might put some severe weather protocol in place where the rain is torrential, but we wouldn't necessarily always stick to the 3 days, especially if it's coming to the weekend time. We put it on for longer, and we don't always wait for the 3 days before we do it. What we do, and this was a learning point from the panel previously was that what we do is when we instigate, we make sure that we send the information around to all the elected members in Kirklees and all of the partners, including the police and emergency duty services, so that they're aware that the emergency provision is activated and is in place, and how they can access it and how they can refer people.
Okay, I think they also do a social media campaign, I think, when they're up out there. And as you wanted to come in quickly, and then we'll go into the work programme.
I did. It's just for the gapping provision in North Kirklees. It's one of those things that is really challenging us as a council. Not because we want some sort of fair shares between North and South, but just because it's an issue in the North and we're having to deal with it in the South, which isn't an appropriate, it's not an appropriate level of service to deliver the outcomes we're seeking to deliver. So we have looked at a number of different options, none of which have come to fruition as yet. And that's partly because we're either going to have to convert something that's existing or build something that's new. We've looked at, and then there's also something about the safeguarding policies that we have. So a lot of the people that come to us are young people who are already vulnerable, and then we have safeguarding duties to them. And I don't need to tell this panel the kind of things that are going on in terms of county lines and the abuse of young vulnerable people, and these sorts of places becoming the target. So we're now in a kind of almost a designing of the model type of phase now. Is what's the model going to look like? So the provider that Helen's referring to, that we're talking to, wants to build 21 bed spaces as reprovisioning for existing. So it's not going to add many more into the equation. But just on that, from 16 to 21 year olds, so she's writing down, must find out who this provider is. But, Children's Services are rightly saying to us, 21 bed hostel of 16 to 21 year olds, is that the right model, and are we compromising their safety and security? So so it's not like the effort we've gone down a long way down, and then actually as a council we've had to step back and say there's a lot of things going on in the system. And those of you who may have seen the BBC investigation into supported housing that's unregulated and therefore is exposed to gangs and county lines type of stuff. So we just have to be aware of that. So please call us back. Please keep challenging us and checking us, but also please be patient with us, because we need to get the model right for our citizens. Yeah.
Wind it up there. Oh, I thought it sounded like it was the ringing for voting or something there. I thought I was in Parliament for a minute. Go to divisions. Okay. Thank you very much, Hannah. Thanks a lot, colleagues. Really appreciate that. Okay, we're just going to quickly cover the work programme. Yes. Did you want to come straight in there, John?
Yeah, Playable Spaces strategy, I think, went to Cabinet. But it hadn't come here first, and I thought we were doing pre-scrutiny these days. So has something gone wrong with the process?
So we did have a bit of an issue with our timetabling in terms of playable spaces. So we were looking to have it come to the panel earlier than this month, really. And then because there were some reviews taking place at a senior level, it didn't end up happening. So there was some conversations about why that didn't happen, and actually trying to be clear that the expectation is that we try and see as much as possible pre-scrutiny. So unfortunately, because they've tried to do this sort of internal review, it's been pulled, and then we've had to put it on a later date. But talking about it, as we're moving on to the work programme now, it will be coming in November. Absolutely going forward, we need to see as much as possible pre-cabinet really and pre-decision making. So I do agree with you there, John. But we will see it in November. It is so we've asked for it to come as quickly as possible. Richard.
Just on page 202, relationship with KNH. Right, I mean, obviously it's a massive issue, and when are we going to talk about it?
So I've still to have my lead member briefing on that. So for each of these topics, I normally get a pre-briefing. We have asked that it comes to scrutiny, and have we got a draft date for that yet?
December.
Provisionally December or January we're looking at, but I just need to get my sort of pre-briefing first and then sort out the timetables fully. Okay, is that okay?
I think you want to maybe restrict it to 2 items in agenda.
Yes,
so there's sufficient time.
I do recognise that. I think we need to look again at the agenda. I think 3 items was too much, really. Just a bit of learning from today. So I think we're going to have to, we'll look at how meaty the topics are and try and make sure we keep, we're keeping an eye on that and try and keep them to 2, really, because I don't want to restrict members too much. I think because we had the deputation as well, and we actually spent quite a bit of time before members were able to come in to questions. So we'll certainly think about that, John.
My observation would be that there was too much talking by the cabinet members, to be honest, and they kept coming back in, and actually it's for us to scrutinise them, not for them to tell us everything they want to tell us. So I think we perhaps need, through you, Chair, I think you perhaps need to push back a bit harder on the cabinet members to say you're here to answer questions, not to you know, expand on everything you want to talk about. You know, you're being scrutinised.
Take on board what you're saying. I think there's a bit of balance because we do need to hear their side of things as well. I take your point, John, and I'll certainly feed that back. So we need a bit of a balance of, you know, giving them the opportunity to respond, but also making sure it's as direct as possible to the questions that we're putting to them as well. Okay. So for the next meeting in November, we're going to be looking at playable spaces, and also the other topic that came up in terms of housing was tenants and residents associations. So we're going to be bringing that as a topic as well in November. Okay. Is there any other issues with topics that anyone wants to raise? No? Okay then. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for your time and all your input. Thank you.